everyone. I'm going to call the Community and Business Relations Committee to order at 6:40 p.m. We have one item on our agenda this evening, and it is a policy. No, I lost it.
Regulating signs, objects, and decorations.
Yes. So there is, there's just a memo in our packet, correct?
Just a
And
few.
then-
There's
oh,
a
yeah.
few attachments included, but the attachments included our old materials and previous, so
Right.
nothing new.
It's the HRC policy position letter and then the memo from Attorney Bader.
That's correct. So I'll just tee it up here. So we just wanted, this is our first time in a standing committee. And what I'd like to do is use some of your comments to start from scratch a new policy based on Attorney Baer's comments. And Nathan, I'm gonna work on it. So I'm gonna be the one to draft it, and then I'll have you review before we take it to the standing committee. But before I draft anything, I just wanna ask the question, do you want a policy? And if so, what does it look like? So that's kind of the goal of today, is as you as a standing committee, do you want a policy? What do you want to look like? I have a few discussion questions depending on how you come about that, but that's basically the goal for today.
What is, I think Tammy beat me.
No, go ahead. I'm curious to hear your reason.
That's a big buildup. Maybe this is something that's retreading old ground, but what do other municipalities do here? I mean, I feel like we're kind of inventing all of these things and almost reinventing the wheel. What does Glendale do? What does Bay do? Maybe you don't know, what does Milwaukee do? Because I feel like we can't be unique in go ahead.
And I'd like to dovetail off of that. Also, like, I understand the HRC, they made a recommendation, they kicked it to us to do the policy creation. And maybe that might be an area, instead of asking staff to invest a lot of time, because I'm not really comfortable with having them spend a lot of time on this unless there's, on a lot of those different areas. For a variety of reasons. But anyway, that might be a nice thing to ask the HRC, and maybe they've already done this, and I forget.
They haven't.
Like, what are other municipalities and other municipalities that are similar to Shorewood, more progressive, very educated communities with a very diverse population, and all that kind of stuff. It's just a thought. I'm not saying that's where we have to go. I'm not willing to do that research, and I don't know if you guys want to do that. I just don't have the time. But I would also say that this is a really interesting, area that we're working our arena, and I have been on the board for 7 years, and I'm not saying that I have am struggling with this for a variety of reasons, like getting rid of any kind of decorations on village property that, some of the things that were outlined before. I don't want to go extreme, and I don't want to be offensive either, but I'm going to say in my 7 years here, I have not had a single person ever approach me, ever, and they approach me about a lot of things, right? Including neighbors' garbage can colors, stickers, whatever. Not a single person. This doesn't mean this doesn't exist. To come to me and say that I'm offended by holiday lights on trees or certain things. So, where am I going with this? I appreciate the work that the HRC has done. I want us to continue to be an open and inclusive community. I don't want us to be too draconian, though, in some of our regulations for a variety of reasons. And maybe if this is, we had last meeting, we had a split board on this, right? So perhaps this is something, and we've only had a couple of emails about this since that decision, but I know there's probably fanfare and whatnot, which I don't care to even be privy to. But maybe this is something we take out we put in our survey that's going out, or we, somehow get input from people without doing a public forum necessarily. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just spitballing here, but I don't really have a lot of desire to spend a lot of time on this creation. So that's my 2 cents, or 49 cents.
Trustee Warren?
And I would concur. I think the line that we're trying to walk here is we want to be inclusive and we want members of the village to feel welcome, obviously. We want them to feel comfortable in their own village. We don't want to be overly draconian in the kinds of regulations and policies that we build. Which again, it goes back to kind of my question as to how other municipalities have handled this, but I think you're right. You know, it becomes a resource issue. And who best does it? God knows, you're really busy. This is not like let's have Tyler do it and he'll pull it for us for next meeting. So maybe it is something for the HRC. I mean, part of me feels like I don't want to keep directing the HRC to do this, do that, do the other thing.
Well, maybe they don't have interest and then they don't have to do it. That's the other part. You know, I mean, these residents, sorry to interrupt, but, you know, it's not, like, I don't also believe it as a board that we should, you know, delegate down to the resident committees either. They work on things that they find important and, you know, that spark their interest. And I know we have a different opinion on this whole board on you know, the purpose of the resident communities, or committees, but, so I mean, it's just an option. We could say, do you wanna give us, I would want more information before, and I also am not gonna prioritize this, and I understand that we have, you know, the winter holidays coming up. But I've said this before last time, and I'm gonna continue to say it, there is no unnecessary urgency, just because we are, you know, have started discussing this, that we have to do something this year. And maybe that's a mistake, but that's a mistake I'm willing to make.
I don't want to make a quick decision that's not well thought through. I don't want to start deviating from things we've done for a long time that we haven't received a lot of feedback on in order to get something through quickly. I think it's more important to think this through and to have a policy that we all can support. And I think that starts with looking at, again, what
Other
places.
like-minded municipalities.
Yeah, like-minded.
And then one other thing I want to say is in the chronology that was presented here in the memos, and I forgot to mention this last time or email you guys whenever I thought about it, there are two major things that are missing. And well, maybe they're minor, but one of them is that we had this discussion last year because the bid director, Erica Lang, came to us and mentioned that she wanted to put a menorah up when they were putting up the holiday tree in Kensington Square, Wood
A
Square.
special event.
Yeah, and that's
Permit
not
request.
mentioned in your, and we had a very, it was a really interesting, board discussion because, it was, two of the members of the board, two of our board members were saying that they were, how do I put it, I don't wanna misquote, but the problem that they had with the menorah lighting on, forgive me, I don't know the accurate date, December 1st or December 2nd, was that it wasn't the actual date that you should light the menorah. Like, you know what I mean? It didn't coincide with the beginning of Hanukkah.
Okay.
And also, it was mentioned that they had, one of the two had an issue because Hanukkah is not analogous to Christmas. It's not like Jewish Christmas. You know what I'm saying? So, and anyway, so that part of the discussion was omitted from this altogether. So we had different reasons. Do you not remember this? Last year?
Yeah, but I think I might be able to save you a lot of effort. You can continue the,
You wanna summarize what I'm
recollection.
trying to say and where I'm going?
no, cause I actually think that what is before us tonight does not.
Sure, but I'm talking about inclusivity and like how a lot of this did come up and then where it went from there. And I understand what you're saying. And the second thing that's omitted from the chronology is that the two members of the HRC asked in the October or September meeting after you wrote your comments when they brought forward the first draft of the recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
And then your comments, you know, were included, and then they wanted to bring it back because to the HRC committee in order to discuss. Am I making this up? Are you-
That'd be number 5 in the
I missed it. Okay.
chronology. Yeah, so
Well,
that part's
hold on, I
there.
don't have that part up. Well, but it says that we instructed them to take it back. They asked for it to go back,
They did.
which is very
I
different.
just said the board deferred the policy. I mean, that was the action that was taken that night, but
Sure,
yeah, sure. Yeah, the Human Relations Commission did agree with that direction.
right. They requested, two members of the HRC requested, and then we listened to them. This is important because it's like, I don't want this to be presented as we're not respecting and honoring the wishes of the HRC. They, you know, we agreed that night that we would defer, we would, you know, let them take this back because, you know, they, for a variety of reasons. But anyway, maybe it's not gonna work. Okay, sorry, Ian.
Would a possibly a very, very, very brief timeline, or not timeline, but sort of progression of how we got to where we are might help clarify some things in people's minds, because that's what I did to prepare for the meeting today. And I think it kind of shows how we hopscotch to where we are, skipping a few steps along the way. But the first question that was posed to me through the HRC, through staff, was, well, wait a minute, I think that the discussion started, we've got this Christmas tree that's displayed at Atwater every year, but how come there's no other religious displays out there? And the answer was, quite simply, that the Supreme Court has said, well, Christmas trees are secular, they're so ubiquitous that they've lost religious meaning, and it doesn't create an issue. So the follow-up question was, okay, can we allow outside groups to place something like menorah or other religious symbols at Atwater during the holiday season? The answer is yes. However, if you do that, if you go there, you've got to make sure that you give equal access to all groups, and that's what Manitowoc did. And someone was asking earlier, a few people were asking about what other places. This is 9 pages of small type, single space policy. So once you open Pandora's box and you go there, what they did is they created a huge area in front of the courthouse with 200 square foot, 20 by 20 patches on it, and said anyone and everyone can apply for a permit to make a display there, and as long as it's not obscene, you get it for 30 days, and like a $25 or a $50 permit fee. So that's one thing.
So in other words, if we did that for Atwater Park, every square inch of the park is likely to end up filled.
Yes, and that's a great point, because so when
We don't have that much space.
Right, when we gave that back to the HRC, they said, well, we don't really, we don't really want to do that, because we want people to be able to use the park, we just don't have the kind of space that they do. So that, I think, is where they came back with this language relating to banning all holiday decorations. They thought, well, they used the word secular there, which got a lot of people interested in what was going on, based upon, I think, my indication to them that because Christmas trees were secular, that, they wanted to include that. So my interpretation of what HRC was trying to say is, look, we understand that Christmas trees are secular, but out of respect for those of other religions, if we can't put a menorah up, let's not put a Christmas tree up either. I reviewed the first policy, and I said, look, the problem with saying you just can't put we're gonna ban all holiday displays or religious displays, is you run into an equal access argument or a constitutional problem, because you're saying you're not allowing them access to make a display in a public space, but it doesn't ban anybody else that's got a non-religious or a non-holiday. So then you're trying to not be discriminatory, but you end up getting sued anyway. So I said, okay, if you're gonna do that, if you want a policy, you've got to have a comprehensive policy that addresses what any private group can place in the public space. And that's when the HRC said back to the board, hey, that's a little above our pay grade, so to speak, that's not our bailiwick. You guys handle that, and we're just gonna give you a letter, and we're just gonna say, okay, we understand that this isn't a policy, but the letter is, we just ask you to exercise your discretion and not put a Christmas tree up there, even though you can, and it's not a legal issue. So that was my understanding of what they were saying back to the board.
I should know this, but I kind of want to ask the question.
Sure.
Because I think it's moved around a little bit on us, and I cannot remember for the life of me what it looks like. But is it a Christmas tree at Atwater Park, or is it more string and lights?
I just think it's string of lights. I mean,
it's not put up, the tree exists there.
right. I mean, it's
So
an
you're putting
permanent
lights
tree.
on a tree, and the recommendation,
Oh, go ahead,
from the
yeah,
HRC had mentioned, or any tree that resembles a Christmas tree. So now we're also talking about, what's that called? There's a legal term for this, you guys have to know this, right? Like, this can slide, right? Like, any tree that resembles a
slippery
Christmas tree.
slope.
So, yeah, right, yeah, fine. Okay, so does that include all firs or anyway? I don't want to be absurd here,
But my only point is, if you don't want to, you don't have to do anything, because here is what the status quo currently is. There's a village code section 354.11, which prohibits any third parties from affixing a notice, poster, or paper to a municipal lamp post, utility pole, tree, or any other public structure or building. Then we've got 455.10, which allows limited commercial displays in the right of way in the bid board area, right in front of the business that they own. That's a commercial issue, we don't have any problem with that. And then the other just sort of unwritten policy is that the village has not allowed any third-party groups not directly associated with the village to erect signs, symbols, or other structures on municipal property. The only times that we've allowed it was essentially for the farmers market and summer sounds, which were events that the village was partnering with or sponsoring. So that's the existing status quo. If you wanna take those things and sort of all put them in one place, you can. You don't have to. This is all up to the board, but you know, it's all a discretionary thing, but I think it behooves us to look at how we got here, because it started with a rather simple, innocent question, which is, okay, if we've got a quote-unquote Christmas tree there, why is that? And then if we're gonna allow that, why don't we just let everybody display anything that they want? And then, you know, HRC kind of stepped back and said, we just don't have that much room to do what Manitowoc did.
I just don't think, I just don't think that's a slope you wanna go down, given the space.
Right, yeah, I mean, if anyone, I have copies of this, I can email it around too. But this is, you know, I don't, they say the devil's in the details, and this is 9 pages of single-spaced, you know, and they could still get sued, you know?
I mean, the way I had always seen it, and maybe this is the lawyer in me, was that we essentially follow what the law is with a kind of, with a carve out of, you know, if people feel like there's a declaration that is not inclusive, we look at it as a board and we say yay or nay. I mean, and that's not something we need to, I'm not advocating like rushing that through, but you know, when we went in, that's kind of what I thought.
So,
And, you know, frankly, up until this, I had not received much feedback, up until the Channel 12 story and kind of the, you know, when we were talking about taking everything down. But that's kind of where I thought we were gonna end up here, just kind of following the law, and I assume other municipalities, I would assume that's how they're outlining their own policies.
yeah.
So,
Well, there's a difference between what you do yourself as a municipality versus when you're talking about opening it up to third parties.